This week marks 10 years since the disappearance of three brothers from our area. Tanner, Alexander, and Andrew Skelton would be 15, 17, and 19 years old now.
I love them, and I miss them. The hugs and the goodnight kisses and the I love you mommies.
On Thanksgiving weekend in 2010, three young brothers went to spend time with their father, just as they had done many times before. It was supposed to be a short custody visit, nothing unusual, nothing alarming. But by the next morning, the boys were gone. No witnesses, no confirmed sightings, no clear answers. And more than a decade later, the truth about what happened to the Skelton brothers remains one of Michigan's most haunting unsolved mysteries. Who were the Skelton brothers? Andrew Alexander and Tanner Skelton were three brothers from Morenci, Michigan. Andrew was 9 years old, Alexander was 7, and Tanner was just 5. By all accounts, they were energetic, close-knit, and deeply bonded to one another. Friends and family described them as typical kids who loved playing together and relied heavily on each other, especially during times of change. That change came when their parents, John and Tanya Skelton, went through a difficult divorce. Custody disputes followed, creating tension that would later become central to the investigation. Despite the conflict between the adults, there was no indication, at least publicly, that the children themselves were in immediate danger until they vanished. The custody visit that changed everything. On November 25th, 2010, Thanksgiving Day, John Skelton picked up his sons for a scheduled custody visit. The plan was simple. The boys would spend the night with their father and return to their mother the following day. According to court arrangements, this visit was routine and approved. That night, the children stayed at John Skelton's home in Morenci. What happened inside that house is known only to one person. By the next morning, the boys were no longer there. When Tanya Skelton arrived to pick up her sons on November 26th, she was met with silence. John Skelton did not answer the door. Repeated attempts to contact him failed. Growing increasingly alarmed, she contacted police to report her children missing. What officers discovered next only deepened the mystery. A father's first story. When police finally located John Skelton later that day, he did not appear panicked about his children's disappearance. Instead, he told officers a story that would later unravel under scrutiny. According to his initial account, he claimed that during the night he had taken the boys to meet an underground group, a network he described vaguely as people who would keep the children safe and protect them from their mother. He suggested that the children were now living anonymously, hidden away, and that they would not be harmed. This claim immediately raised red flags. Law enforcement could find no evidence that such a group existed. There were no names, no locations, no communication records, and no witnesses to support his story. As investigators pressed for details, John Skelton's version of events began to shift. Contradictions began to surface. Under questioning, John Skelton altered his story multiple times. In one version, he suggested the boys were with acquaintances he refused to identify. In another, he implied that he no longer knew exactly where they were. Eventually, he claimed he had handed them over to protect them from abuse, an accusation that authorities found unsupported by evidence. What troubled investigators most was not just the lack of proof, but the inconsistency. Each retelling introduced new contradictions, missing timelines, and vague explanations. Surveillance footage, phone records, and vehicle data failed to confirm his claims. Meanwhile, the clock was ticking. A search begins. But answers do not follow. Law enforcement launched an extensive search across Michigan and neighboring states.
And tonight we have a case that is more than 10 years old and involves three boys, Alexander, Andrew, and Tanner. They were 9, 7, and 5 years old.
Amber alerts were issued, media coverage intensified. Volunteers combed wooded areas, abandoned buildings, and remote properties. Despite the massive effort, there were no confirmed sightings of the Skelton brothers. Search dogs failed to pick up a trail beyond the home. No physical evidence, clothing, backpacks, or personal belongings was ever recovered. It was as if the boys had vanished completely. As days turned into weeks, the case shifted from a missing children investigation to something far darker. The house on Allen Road investigators focused heavily on John Skelton's home, searching it multiple times. Forensic teams examined the property, vehicles, and surrounding areas. While nothing conclusively tied the home to the children's disappearance, the absence of evidence became evidence itself. There were no signs of a struggle, no blood, no forced exits. everything appeared disturbingly normal. This raised a chilling possibility. Whatever happened to the Skelton brothers may not have left obvious physical traces, or those traces were deliberately removed. Legal consequences without answers. Despite the lack of proof regarding what happened to the boys, authorities charged John Skelton with multiple counts of unlawful imprisonment. The charges were based not on what could be proven happened to the children, but on the fact that he intentionally withheld them from their legal guardian and obstructed their return. In court, prosecutors argued that regardless of his claims, his actions directly led to the disappearance of 3 children who have never been seen again. In 2011, John Skelton was convicted and sentenced to prison. However, the conviction did not answer the most important question of all. Where are Andrew, Alexander, and Tanner?
As you can imagine, the boys' birthdays, the holidays are hard. Every moment is a struggle for their mother. Her heartbreak may stand still, but her anger grows stronger every day.
A mother left without closure. For Tanya Skelton, the conviction brought little relief. Without knowing where her sons were or whether they were alive, there could be no closure. Year after year, she continued to speak publicly, pleading for information and urging her former husband to reveal the truth. She has repeatedly stated that she does not believe the boys are alive, but that knowing what happened to them would at least allow her to grieve properly. Her words reflect the reality faced by families of the missing. Uncertainty can be more painful than the truth. An investigation that still raises questions. As time passed, the Skelton brothers' case became one of Michigan's most troubling unresolved disappearances. The lack of physical evidence, combined with a constantly changing narrative from the only known person involved, left investigators with limited options. The case files remain open. Tips still come in, but no breakthrough has occurred. What makes this case especially disturbing is not just that 3 children disappeared, but that the story surrounding their disappearance continues to change, even years later. And that is where the mystery deepens. Theories that emerged as hope faded. As months passed without any sign of Andrew, Alexander, or Tanner, investigators and the public began considering possibilities that went far beyond the father's original claims. Theories ranged from the boys being hidden by an unknown network, to them being taken out of the country, to far darker conclusions involving foul play. Law enforcement consistently stated that there was no credible evidence supporting the idea that the children were alive and living under assumed identities. No school records, medical visits, or financial trails ever surfaced. For 3 young children to remain completely hidden for years would require resources, coordination, and silence from multiple people, none of which investigators could verify. Gradually, authorities shifted their focus toward the most painful possibility, that the Skelton brothers may not have survived the night they disappeared. John Skelton's later statements and shifting claims. Over the years, John Skelton continued to make statements from prison that further complicated the case. At times, he suggested the boys were alive but unreachable. At other times, he implied that revealing their location would endanger them or others. These statements were never backed by evidence and often contradicted his earlier claims. In some interviews, he hinted that he had acted out of fear and desperation rather than malice. In others, he appeared detached, refusing to provide details unless certain conditions were met. Investigators noted that his behavior followed a consistent pattern: vague claims, no verifiable facts, and constant deflection. Despite repeated appeals from law enforcement and the children's mother, John Skelton has never provided information that led to the discovery of the boys or their remains. The question of motive. Understanding motive is critical in any criminal investigation, and in this case, it remains deeply contested. Prosecutors argued that the motive was control, an attempt to permanently remove the children from their mother during a bitter custody dispute. They pointed to documented tensions, legal filings, and personal communications as evidence that the divorce had deeply affected John Skelton. Defense arguments, on the other hand, emphasized his claims of fear and protection, suggesting he believed he was acting in the children's best interests. However, courts consistently rejected this explanation due to the lack of proof and the harm caused by permanently depriving the children of safety and stability. What makes motive so difficult to assess is that the outcome is unknown. Without knowing what happened to the children, every explanation remains incomplete. Searches that led nowhere. Over the years, law enforcement conducted multiple targeted searches based on tips and statements. Landfills, wooded areas, bodies of water, and abandoned properties were examined. In one notable effort, investigators searched locations in Ohio after John Skelton made statements suggesting the boys may have been taken there. None of these searches produced physical evidence tied conclusively to the Skelton brothers. The absence of evidence became one of the most frustrating aspects of the case. Investigators were left with a scenario where something clearly happened, but whatever occurred left no trail that could be followed to its end. A case that changed how custody disputes are viewed beyond the tragedy itself. The Skelton brothers' disappearance had a broader impact. The case prompted discussions within Michigan and beyond about how custody disputes are handled, especially when warning signs are present. It highlighted the limitations of family court systems when it comes to predicting extreme outcomes. Experts later noted that while custody conflicts are common, cases that escalate to disappearance are rare, but devastating when they occur. The Skelton case became an example used in law enforcement training and child protection discussions to emphasize the importance of risk assessment and early intervention. It also reinforced a painful truth. Once a child disappears, recovery becomes exponentially more difficult with each passing hour. A mother's long wait for answers. For Tanya Skelton, the years have passed without resolution. Birthdays, holidays, and milestones have come and gone without her sons. She has spoken publicly about the emotional toll of living without certainty, not knowing whether to hope or mourn. She has repeatedly asked her former husband to tell the truth, not for punishment, but for peace. In interviews, she has stated that even the worst truth would be better than endless uncertainty. If this story moved you, share your thoughts in the comments. Raising awareness keeps cases like this alive and reminds the world that these children are not forgotten. Like this video and subscribe to the channel for more in-depth stories that deserve to be told.